Hello and welcome. My name is Charlotte Hill. I'm a PhD student here at UC Berkeley, and I'm here with Professor of Public Policy and Political Science, Sarah Anzia, and the former governor of Michigan, Jennifer Granholm, who's also a professor here at UC Berkeley. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
So, 2018 was an incredible year for women at the ballot box.
Woohoo!
We saw an unprecedented number of women getting elected to the US Congress. And it seems like there's something different this year compared to past elections. But it's not totally clear from an outsider's perspective what it is that is different. Is it just that more women were running? Is it that women were running campaigns that were qualitatively different from campaigns that had been run in the past? Could either of you shed some light on that? Maybe Sarah.
Sure. Well, I think the really big story was the record numbers of women running for particularly U.S. House, and specifically Democratic women. I think prior to this year, the record for Democratic women running for office, running for U.S. House, was something like 190 back in 2012. And this past election, it was over 350 filed to become candidates. So it's a huge jump from the record. And then on top of that, they did really well. Women won their Democratic women won their primaries at higher rates than any other group. And so what you had was a record number of Democratic nominees who were women, 43% or something like that. And I guess the other notable thing is this did not happen on the Republican side. That the numbers of Republican women running for House were pretty much, they looked like they had before. So this was definitely just an amazing year for Democratic women in particular running for office.
There's another piece of information which I think is such a great anecdote about the enthusiasm on the part of women to run, because normally, prior to this year, we used to really have to persuade women to run. You had to ask them 5 times, et cetera. Emily's List, who of course helps pro-choice Democratic women, this past cycle. So they, in a normal cycle, in the cycle before this past one, they had about 900 women who had raised their hand and had approached them and said, I want to run. In this cycle, so 900 last time, in this cycle, 42,000 women.
Yeah.
Does that give you goosebumps or what?
Yeah.
I mean, so there is something qualitatively different about what has happened between the last cycle and this one. And it has caused more women voters to step up, and it's caused more women to run for office. So the question is, what is it? And obviously, we got a big answer in the White House because it is largely Democratic women, right? People are angry and feel empowered to take our nation back, feel like perhaps they have a responsibility to do that. And so that Women's March and the millions of women who participated in 600 marches across the country, all of that sort of was the initial fuel. And then after that, women felt like, heck yes, this is my country. I'm not just going to sit back and allow others to make decisions for me. I'm going to take a participatory role. So that was super exciting. I think really important catalyst, in addition to probably some other things that you probably have ideas on.
Well, I mean, this is just anecdotal, but there were a number of accounts of primary campaign ads also that looked different than they had in the past. You had women running as women rather than following sort of the old playbook. So campaign ads, with showing women breastfeeding, right, or talking about sexual assault, or people bringing their kids along, right. So that seemed, again, this is purely anecdotal, but seemed like a shift this time around.
So in Michigan, this is just one classic example. The woman who ran for Attorney General of Michigan, her name is Dana Nessel. She had a minute-long introductory ad, and this is what her ad was basically: vote, and this is not censored, vote for the one without the penis. Not kidding you, that was her ad, and she won, significantly.
Yeah.
She ran as a woman. Obviously, you have to run as a woman if you are a woman, but your point about in previous times, you were told, I was told, don't even show your children because people don't want to be thinking about whether you will be capable of being in office. But this time, totally authentic ads that had women showing who they were, women fighter pilots, women who are, with their families, et cetera. It was so refreshing and authentic. And that, I think, is the gift that this past cycle has given to us, is this notion that you can be imperfect and use some, not that women, being a woman is imperfect, but you can use some of your challenges as a way to have people relate to you. You know, obviously being a woman, but like I think of Stacey Abrams, who ran for governor of Georgia. She had some issues with some finances in the past, some loans, et cetera, and she used that as a way to say, I am not the only one, you know, I'm somebody who went to Yale, et cetera, and I'm having problems. So what is their average citizen having? So all of that is to say that authentic challenge and struggle and laying it out there is, I think, a real difference.
So why do we think this matters to have women versus men holding office? Clearly it matters for descriptive representation, for young women to grow up seeing people who look like them in office. Are there other ways that women legislators govern differently or legislate differently?
Didn't you do some research on that?
Yeah, well, and I think it can easily be misrepresented because, I have an article I published a while back with Chris Berry at University of Chicago where we show evidence that in Congress, the female legislators appear to outperform the male legislators in bringing money back to their districts, in sponsoring and co-sponsoring bills. They're doing more, and there's actually new work by Sarah Fulton suggesting that women are also doing more constituency service, more casework. And so now before you take that and draw conclusions, the explanation appears to be that in the past it has been more difficult for women to have the same success in getting elected to office. And so to get the same vote share, to get the same support from voters, women on average had to be a bit better. And so when you look at the pool of people who are elected, the women on average are outperforming the men. But in addition to that, there's a lot of research suggesting that female legislators are more collaborative, perhaps more bipartisan, that they prioritize different issues. They're pushing policies supportive of women and families, social welfare, civil rights, health, education, and there are some clear differences there in terms of the policies they push.
We certainly saw Hillary Clinton champion early childhood education, childcare for working parents in her presidential campaign in 2016. Can we expect to see some of those issues staying at the top of the policy priority list in the 2020 presidential campaign?
Oh, I think so. I think totally. Women's issues have been sort of relegated as this second tier of issues because a woman is the one who bears children, a woman is the one who's primarily responsible in many cases. However, in an environment where women are at the table and insisting that these are women's issues, yes, these are children's issues, and children are not male, children are male and female, and this should be an issue for all of us. And so I think what you're seeing, for example, even in California, you have a male governor who's pushing parental leave, 6-month parental leave policies. He's pushing universal preschool. I mean, and that's awesome. And I think largely because millennial men and younger men who are coming up understand the importance of making sure that policy is inclusive and helps the family move forward. So those historically have been women's issues. Hopefully they are they should be women and men's issues. But I do think that just on the process side, women are, just anecdotally, again, I have found that women are really quite collaborative. So when I had the hardest pieces of legislation to push through, I had a Republican House and a Republican Senate, and so I needed to work in a bipartisan way. So whenever I had something that was really tough, there was a Democratic woman in the House and a Republican woman in the Senate that I would ask to work together on it. And those two would do all of the consultative work that was needed for the constituency groups to make this happen, et cetera. They were by far and away the most effective legislators. Patty Burkholz, Representative Warren, they were the ones who got the hardest stuff through because they could, and they were not seen as threatening for whatever reason.
That's really interesting. You mentioned, Jennifer, that there had been a shift after President Trump's 2016 election in the mobilization and activation of women at the grassroots level, women voters. Can you speak a little more about that? How has that activism landscape changed?
Oh, it's awesome. I mean, look at all of these groups that have been born since Donald Trump was elected, I guess that's the silver lining for democracy, is that he's really energized a huge amount of participation. And so whether it's swing left or sister district or, you know, indivisible, I mean, there's just a plethora of groups. A lot of them focused on women. Here in the Bay Area, there's a group called Emerge that really helps women to become elected, and they have spread across the country. And they, like Emily's list, we're seeing this huge uptick in women who were raising their hand to say, I am interested in running, in saving my community in some way, shape, or form. And it wasn't just Congress. You know, this happened up and down the ballot. I mean, in Michigan, we had a woman elected as governor, a woman elected as attorney general, a woman elected as secretary of state. We took back 2 congressional seats that were both women. I mean, it was really an all-female year, which was fantastic, and it wasn't just Michigan as an anecdote. So I think that the president has been an incredible motivator. But ultimately, on the ground, it may be the spark that got people to raise their hand, but in real communities across the country, it really was healthcare. And I think women are a trusted deliverer of the message of the importance of healthcare. Not that men aren't, men are as well, but I think that women embody that, whether it's not just reproductive freedom, but that's one of the aspects of healthcare that I think people are energized about, women are energized about. So I think women took advantage of both Trump in the White House as well as Trump's express desire to kill the Affordable Care Act to say, no, 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 we're going to stop that. This is too important for people on the ground.
I mean, I think just the turnout in 2018
historic.
Just blew me away. I give a lecture every year about, you know, and I talk about the seesaw pattern in midterm and presidential election turnout. In a typical midterm, it's 40% of eligible voters participating typically. It was something like 50%, it was close to 50%. Yeah. This is a huge uptick. It looked more like a presidential election.
But close.
Oh, exactly.
Right.
And so that is really different. I think it's like compared to the midterms in the last 100 years, this just stands out as a huge event.
And I think what was striking about it was the number, particularly of suburban college-educated women who came out to flip the House. I mean, really, they flipped the House. Women of color, African American women in particular, are clearly such a strong base for the Democrats on making that. But when you can add to that by including women who had perhaps in even 2016 voted for Donald Trump, and who had aligned with the Republicans and who said, enough is enough. This is just too much to bear. I've got to get out and help save my community. That, I think, was a real contributor to that.
So that's really interesting. 4 in 10 women still identify with the Republican Party, either by calling themselves Republicans or saying they lean toward the Republican Party. And yet we see certain issues that seem to mobilize women on both sides, regardless of their partisan slant. So do you think that there's an opportunity for women to kind of come together as a voting bloc, as an issue-focused voting bloc in 2020 and moving forward and bypass some of the partisan politics?
Maybe a little bit, but I wouldn't be too optimistic there. I mean, so most Republican women still wanted to confirm Judge Kavanaugh, right? So partisanship is still a huge factor. And the shifts we saw in particularly white women between 2016 and 2018 were significant, but so something like 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump in 2016. It looks like there was an increase in the share of white women voting for Democrats for House this past election, something like 49% of Democratic white women. But at the same time, that's not it's big because the numbers are big, but partisanship is still going to be a huge divider there. And I think that we can't talk about women as a bloc for that reason. They're not they don't vote as a bloc.
I would say I have a little more optimism than you do, only because of the unprecedented nature, I think, of this presidency. He's so sui generis and so causes such reaction. But particularly among independents, obviously that middle block is so huge, and like 59% of the independents voted Democratic, or maybe it was 56%, but nonetheless, it was a big block, and a lot of those women, a lot of those were women, right, suburban women. So I do think, I mean, historically, I'd be curious about your position on this, Sarah. Historically, white women have voted Republican, And white women often, white Republican women have aligned themselves behind the patriarchy, if you will, right? Taken cover by the patriarch. But I am seeing, and perhaps it's just anecdotally, and perhaps it's just because I'm in the mix on this, but I'm seeing so much alignment between white women and women of color as opposed to white women and white men. So there seems to be a real push about we're all in this together, and we've got to team up to be able to make an impact.
I mean, I agree. There's definitely been a shift, a perceptible shift. How far it will go, I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure. It's just a polarization is at its peak, and well, we don't know, but it's difficult to say how much unification you can get under the women umbrella with the degree of polarization and partisanship we have now. But we'll see. We will see.
So let's talk a little bit about the media. In the 2016 presidential election, there was certainly a lot of talk about Hillary Clinton being covered differently by the media than Donald Trump and even Bernie Sanders on the left. And now, moving into the 2020 presidential election, which is already right around the corner, we can expect to have probably 4, at least, female Democratic contenders for that race. Should we expect that media coverage will be similar of those candidates as it was of Hillary Clinton?
Well,
do you think journalists have learned?
Right. I mean, the minute Elizabeth Warren announced that she had formed an exploratory committee and she was getting in, you saw a headline from Politico saying, is she facing the likability factor that Hillary Clinton faced, right, which is what you're alluding to. I think the media has a role to play in checking their biases at the door. There's clearly about that. I think women who are running know this. It is clear that that voters expect women to be more likable, whether that's fair or not. Obviously, it's not fair. We never asked that about the very unlikable president of the United States. But anyway, we don't expect the same thing of men. But what I say to women who are in it, look, you are going to face biases. It just is part of the deal. So as Ann Richards said when she was governor of Texas, and it's alluding to the whole thing you were saying about women in state legislatures, the old saw that women have to do, women can do everything that men can do. Remember, Ginger Rogers did everything that Fred Astaire did. She just did it backwards in high heels. Women have to be twice as good to be considered half as good, and that's just it. But here's what I say to them is that's a fact, but don't highlight the fact that you think you are a victim, because people do not want to elect a victim. They want to elect a warrior. And the only way we are going to eliminate those biases is to get warriors in office at the table in those positions so that those biases go away over time. We're not going to fix it in one election. These women will have that bias, but they cannot succumb to it.
I mean, I think that the thing that hasn't and will not change is the need to cover what is going to get clicks and is going to get readers, and that is a constant. At the same time, I think that there's greater awareness of the potential for differential treatment than perhaps there was a few years back. And frankly, I think in terms of the research, it's really difficult to study just because a lot of it's so nuanced and subtle. If you're trying to create a measure of bias, right, it's difficult because a lot of it's hard to track. And comparing Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump in 2016, okay, it's difficult to attribute anything that happened to gender bias because, look, they're two people, they're really unusual. To say, when people said her voice is shrill, okay, that's probably a gender thing, right? But it's a difficult thing to study. It's the sort of thing where there are studies suggesting there's no bias in the volume of coverage and the content of coverage, right? If you look at men and women congressional candidates. At the same time, you think, maybe we're just not measuring this, right?
And you know what, there's a great, the democratization of political discourse through Twitter allows for entities to be checked by the masses. And there's so many young people who are on there whose antenna are up and are listening for this and are checking the media all the time. And I just have to say one thing about this shrill voice thing, because you'll hear this again. You even hear strains of it right now in talking about Elizabeth Warren when she went to Iowa, et cetera. This is the hardest thing for women in office because we don't have these deep voices. And so, our natural voice is going to be higher. And if you are, making a forceful point, the speech coaches will train all of these women candidates to try to lower your voice rather than allow it to get up to a higher register, because people are just not there yet.
I would be in big trouble in that situation.
You'd have to. We all would. We're all, I certainly had to check myself a lot on that.
One thing that's really interesting to me is that we have some new members of the U.S. House who are particularly younger women who have been elected, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who seem to be throwing some of those rules out the door and saying, I'm going to be my authentic self, and if you don't like it, so be it. But people on the left, at least, seem to like it. So is there some sort of intersection between age and gender that is playing out here? It seems like it.
I think there totally is, and I love these younger women who are saying, basically, screw you to the political pundits and all of the folks who have historically brought women along. And I think those who are like in the job of training women, like the Emerges and the Emily's List, they're understanding that people are craving that authenticity. That doesn't mean that you can throw everything out, because there's certain sort of bounds that you've got to operate in. But I love the fact that AOC, as she's called, uses social media in a savvier way than almost anybody out there in responding, and is fearless about it. So that fearlessness, I think, is a really important thing that millennials have given as a gift to the political universe.
So 2018 has been labeled by political pundits as the year of the woman. And of course, it's not the first time that this label has been put on a year. I think 1992 was the last time that this label was applied, and that was following the Anita Hill hearings and a handful of senators getting elected in the wake of those hearings. What are some of the parallels that you see between the early 90s and now? And how do you think things have evolved, if at all, between then and now? Let's start with Sarah.
Sure. Well, there are the obvious parallels. Supreme Court nominee accused of sexual harassment, sexual assault, and the backlash to that. At the same time, there was in '92 there were a lot of retirements, congressional retirements, and so this desire for outsiders, and frankly, because women are a minority, they are viewed as outsiders.
Yeah, totally agree.
I think that was part of it. Things that are different, though. Well, first of all, you ended up in '92 with a Democratic president and a Democratic Congress, and that's definitely not where we are now. And polarization is the sort of the elephant in the room. That the divide between the political parties is just nowhere near what it was in '92, and I think that has a major impact. And also, Donald Trump is a phenomenon that has no parallel in 1992. We're just in a completely different world with our current president. So the real question is, can we expect this enthusiasm and this surge in female candidacies to continue? And after '92, we did not. It wasn't a blip, because there was a steady increase over time in the share of women running and elected. And one nice difference between today and '92 is that I think it's seen as more legitimate for women to hold office. There are just a lot more women who are getting elected and running. But it remains to be seen what's going to happen. Is the 2018 surge going to continue into 2020, 2022? I don't know. It's too soon to tell. I don't know. You seem to think that
I think about it. So in 1992, I think there were 5 women who were elected in the Senate, and that was the year of the woman. 5 out of 100.
Right.
Woohoo! Mm-hmm. And then I think 20 years later, in 2012, there were 20 women elected in the Senate, and that was seen as a huge breakthrough. And so, here we are in 2019, and we have 25 women, and, we're still not at 50, so we've still got a long way to go. So I think this Year of the Woman thing, I think the difference really right now is this notion of young women who do not feel bound by previous mores in terms of how you operate politically. I think that these millennial women and younger, the Gen Zs, I think they're called the Mil-Zs, the combination of millennial and Gen Z. They are not having any of it. They're not going back. They are not having any of that. So this push to authenticity and to allowing people, I mean, I think a lot of reality TV has opened up the door of allowing people just to be who they are and to capitalize on struggles. So there's a lot of women who were firsts, who were elected as first, Muslim American woman, first Native American women, and they were unabashed about sharing the challenges that happened and how they the story about overcoming is the most important piece of that, right? And how they championed so that people see, oh, if you overcame that, I can overcome my struggles too. And being open and free to share, I think that is a huge difference. And that women are by circumstance, outsiders. I think that point about them being outsiders is absolutely fundamental. Why not try something else because what we've got ain't working?
Right. And I think also just the success of women this particular midterm, you have now a bunch of role models, a bunch of people that other women can look to and say, oh, maybe I could do that. Like maybe, so I think it does have the potential to have a longer term impact on the political ambition gap between men and women.
Totally agree.
So do you expect to see the same number of women running for office in 2020? More women. And the same or more voter turnout among women?
Yeah, I totally think. I mean, again, partly propelled by opposition to the president, but I do think that you are going to see a woman on the ticket. I firmly believe, I don't know if she'll be in number one or number two, president or vice president, but I think we will have a woman on the ticket, and that's going to be exciting. And I think you're going to see more women who are running for president, who are legitimate, serious contenders. And, that kind of brawling is really healthy from a democracy point of view.
Sarah, any predictions?
I would love to be shown information that would lead me to be optimistic. I want to be encouraged. I just look at we don't know what will happen in 2020 and how long President Trump will be around to be this motivating force and how permanent the impacts are on the Republican Party, right? So if not Donald Trump, there could be another Trump-like figure. And if people are energized to participate when their enemies are in office, right? So for better or for worse, anger is a very strong motivator. Mm-hmm. So the question is, will that persist, that motivation
in 2020?
In 2020 and beyond.
Don't you think it will?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, but I'm just saying going forward, beyond.
I see.
Yeah. So the question being, will we see the enthusiasm and turnout dip at some point in the future? Or is this a lasting
change?
Not in
2020, but who knows into the future.
One thing that was interesting that I believe you mentioned, Governor Granholm, was the suite of resistance organizations that have sprung up after 2016. And I think, of the 4 or 5 that you listed, all of them have at least a female co-founder.
Yep,
or are being led 100% by women.
Yes.
Yeah, so it seems like that could play a role in maintaining enthusiasm and turnout in the years ahead. A new ecosystem of grassroots organizations championed by women.
Yes.
So can you speak to that?
No, I think you put your finger on it. I think women, not just in front of, not just raising their hand to say I'm running, but raising their hand to say I am going to create an ecosystem that ensures greater representation for women across the board. And so many of these, it's great. They do have co-founders, many of them. Some of them are just 2 women who founded it and said enough is enough. But the bottom line is the fact that women are at the ground level building organization, building capacity, in addition to running for office and in addition to voting. Those 3 pieces of democracy are now, you're seeing much greater representation, and I think that will bear fruit in the future.
I think we should wrap it up on that optimistic note. Thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you both.